This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. All righty. Hello. I am joined today by Charlotte Anderson, Talent Attraction Lead at Canva. Charlotte is super passionate about all things culture and employee experience and uses her skills that span marketing and communications and HR to lead the talent attraction strategy for one of the world's most exciting tech businesses. Operating with a really values-based approach, Charlotte is someone who, from where I'm sitting, is so clearly passionate about creating an amazing people experience and also about the work that she does. So she was definitely one of the first people that popped into my head as we were formulating all of this, this podcast. So Charlotte, welcome.
Oh, thank you. What a lovely introduction.
Welcome. Well, I am so grateful to you, given that you are currently making remote working work for you. You're in the UK at the moment, so you are doing a very different time zone to me, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us.
Not at all. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. To kick us off, for context for everyone watching, listening, can you give a little bit of a brief overview of your career and your role as it stands today?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I lead talent attraction at Canva, and that currently entails the talent brand team, the inclusion recruiting team, and our talent programs team. So I feel incredibly lucky that kind of with me working in that talent attraction space, I have such an incredible bench of people working across very, very different components of talent attraction. But as well as that, I'm working with TA. So I get to work with talent acquisition every day, our communications team, our people experience team, our social team. So my role is incredibly diverse, and it really enables me to kind of stretch into different skills. But to your point around people experience, I most recently got to work on Canva's response to Roe v. Wade over the weekend. And for me, getting an opportunity to work on something like that, I have an immense sense of pride because I genuinely get to impact the day-to-day for people at Canva, but then also share that with the world and weave that into our candidate experience, our people experience, and really try to shape how Canvanauts and hopefully future Canvanauts experience Canva.
Amazing. And I absolutely love that example because it is something that is so front of mind at the moment. I saw your post about that the other day, how you haven't stopped thinking about it. And obviously it is something that has just happened. And I think so many of us kind of think as individuals, what can we do? What can we do to kind of support? And there's obviously a few kind of small options available to us, but to have that level of influence in a business of Canva's size where you can kind of, run communications on it and make change and do something around that must feel very gratifying and make you feel a little less helpless as a woman who's obviously hearing about this horrendous news over in America over the weekend. So it's fantastic to be able to take action around that. And with regards to your pathway into that role, I've spoken about the fact, mentioned the fact that you're rolled, and you've just touched on it as well. It spans lots of different sort of facets and verticals. So how did you sort of, did you even know this role existed, and how did you end up in this particular position?
No, not at all. To be honest, I think when I started, most people were like, what are you talking about? Especially in the Australian market. So I'm originally from Hong Kong. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I started out in public relations, working kind of within the travel luxury side of things. And then I really, really found my space working, should I say, for marketing and communications agencies. So I worked across Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, for clients like New Balance, Movember. I launched Movember officially into Hong Kong, which was an amazing experience, and Liverpool Football Club. So I had a really broad range of experience, but I desperately needed a sea change. So I moved to Australia, like most people, with the plan to stay for a year. Needless to say, I think I'm at 8 years now. And I got a job at an incredible agency called One Green Bean, which at the time was really leading communications, PR, marketing, and just doing the best work. And I got the opportunity to deep dive into social media. So I ultimately ended up leading a team, a social media team across Commonwealth Bank, Nike, Audible, Weight Watchers, Lion Nathan. So it was a really big, meaty, amazing place for me to kind of get into the Australian market. But I had, we may call it a quarter life crisis. I had a moment of reflection. It's tough going. Working in agency, I have so much respect for people that work in agencies. It's incredibly intense, and I think it, a lot of people suffer from burnout. So I got to a point where I realized that I was actually far more interested, rather than the kind of clients, probably not the best thing to say, but rather than the clients, I was really passionate about the experience that my team were having. So I built the L&D framework, I built the review process, and I decided that actually this relationship between HR and comms, there was a really strong opportunity for me there. I just didn't exactly know what it was. And I discovered employer brand, and I was like, oh, okay, this is exciting. This is something that I could probably get on board with. And I applied for an employer brand role at a telco called Amaysim, which is now part of the Optus network. And I stepped into a people team, and it completely changed my career trajectory. And I was so fortunate. I was working for a company that really put its values and its people first. It was an incredible experience, and my role manifested into so many things. I ended up doing the internal communications. I finally ended up leading the TA team. So I went from a kind of employer brand role into comms to ultimately leading TA. And then unfortunately, when we were acquired by Optus, I got made redundant, which I think is actually when we met, because we were introduced through a mutual connection. And that was a bit of a moment for self-reflection. I was like, how can I take all of these things that I've acquired and create something with it? So I just had a baby. I was in the middle of the pandemic, so the timing wasn't ideal. And Bright came along to me, and they said, hey, we've got an opportunity. It's actually within our marketing team, but you definitely get to work on some people stuff too. Small startup, incredible environment. And there I was kind of weighing more into my marketing, but just before I left, I had the opportunity to work on their parental leave packages, which is now one of the best in Australia. And as that was all happening, Canva approached me, and they said, kind of, we see what you're doing. Would you be interested in having a conversation about coming on board at Canva and working in talent brand? And that role has very quickly expanded into where it is today. So a real journey.
Absolutely. And it's a fascinating journey. It's so funny. As a recruiter, I've spent 12 years listening to people talk about their journey and their trajectories. And I'm always fascinated. I don't think it will ever get old for me. I absolutely love just the divergence and the paths we take and how non-linear they are. And I think as well, like you mentioned about the kind of working at Amaysim, obviously within your role, it kind of iterated and grew and took different shapes, but you touched on something that I think is so important that really kind of rings true. And that's the fact that Amaysim for you was a really values-based business, and you really felt aligned to the business. And it's something that we're honestly, just anecdotally, with the conversations that we're having with individuals after the madness of the last few years, it's something that's really driving people at the moment. People don't want to feel like a number. People are leaving businesses that didn't treat them well over the last couple of years en masse. People are leaving businesses who don't see a genuine work-life balance approach and want people back in the office 5 days a week. Like, this is what we're sort of, the reverberation of everything that's happened over the last couple of years is really kind of being felt in the market and in the conversations that myself and my team are having at the moment. With that, the value side of things, I mean, how important do you feel kind of be, and obviously Canva is a very values-based business as well. How important do you feel that is for individuals kind of stepping into a role with any business?
It's, for me, to be honest, it's the most important thing about selecting where you go and what you do next. Because ultimately, if you work for a values-based company, most companies now, if they say they're values-based, it really rings true. It's something that impacts the decisions that you are going to be making day in, day out, and it's going to impact responses to things that are happening in the world. It's going to impact the way that you interact with your team. And I personally don't think I could work anywhere that doesn't hold true to who they are and for it to personally align with who I am. And I know that really narrows down who I could potentially work for, but I'm comfortable with that. I'm very comfortable with the decision of saying, no, that, like, whilst that company is incredible and the benefits they offer are amazing, and oh my goodness, my career trajectory could be awesome, if the values of that company don't align with me. And I very much lean into the empathy space, less of like the hustle hard graft space. I would not operate well. I'd be terrible in a sales team, for example. But I think there's something incredibly powerful in knowing who you are and therefore who you want to be surrounded by day in, day out when you go to work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right, the sets of values, like to be values based isn't one thing. One business might be a rapidly growing startup who do value the hustle and the speed and all of these kind of move fast and break things. And that's perfect for someone who might really align to that. But it's not for everyone. So it's really defining, I think, a good place to start for any individual who's seeking that and wants to feel the reward of kind of working in a business that aligns with your own values. A good place to start is to figure out and define what your own values are, and then go out to market. And with a clear head and a clear notion of what it is you stand for, you can then go out to market and really identify that in people that you're interviewing with leaders, with organizations. It's definitely something that over the last few years, 12 years I've been recruiting in Sydney, it was a nice to have. Like, it was genuinely something that was kind of, if you worked in a business that had good values and they were good people, it was like brilliant. Whereas now I can see the tide has turned so much. For most people we speak to, they really want to have that buy-in from a kind of deeper, more meaningful and purposeful perspective. Do you see that too?
Absolutely. And it's a level of accountability, because you're able to, as an employee, if something doesn't align with the values, be like, hold up, this is what you say, this is what you say your values are. There's a gap here. Let's work on that. Or there's room for improvement here. And it allows you, I think, in terms of the way that you operate every day, it gives you some really clear guardrails of kind of what the environment is that you are working in. And I think actually that's really healthy.
Absolutely. And I think even in thinking about that, for us at Lotus, one of the things that is a guardrail for us, and that is one of our values, is that people experience, that service, and that ties into everything. It ties into how we treat people. And even if you're feeling manic or busy or in training or there's lots going on, whatever the case may be, you can lean back on those and say, well, whatever I'm doing, as long as I'm treating the people that I'm interacting with, be it candidate, client, team member, colleague, whatever, as long as I am treating them with experience first and having that really strong sort of service mentality, then I know I'm working in line with what Lotus is wanting me to do. And that's definitely part of our ethos. And you're right, it can be a bit of a guiding light as well. I imagine for a business like Canva, obviously values and hiring people on value, to flip it on its head, hiring people with a value alignment is important from a business perspective. With the interview process, I mean, Canva is an absolute employer of choice. I know for many candidates I work with, it would be their kind of ultimate in terms of where they ended up. What kind of advice would you give to anyone wanting to work with an employer of choice and a business that is kind of, I guess, top of their game?
Brilliant question. And I think, again, kind of harping back to what I said, make sure that company aligns with your values. I think there are so many companies out there that are just doing amazing work, like incredible work, and have these incredible values, and you maybe haven't heard of them yet, or they're just coming out, they're in like a different phase, I guess, of their kind of employer brand journey. But I think once you have your kind of aligned values, do some research. Like, who are the people that you think align, who are the people that you look at in your network and think, that person, I feel like we're aligned. Where are they working? Who are they connected with? How can I tap into that? And there is such a, and one thing that really excites me, especially, having arrived here 8 years ago and looking at kind of what the employment opportunities were then versus where they are now, particularly if you're interested in that kind of tech startup, scale up space, there are so many incredible places that you can work. And I think it's a values alignment on your end, and then tapping into, I guess, your broader network, understanding what else is out there beyond the kind of hero ones, the ones that, as you say, are at the top of your game, because there are a few, and looking at who's on their trajectory, because you want to be, you want to be on growth like that. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good advice, and definitely advice that I can see being extremely relevant and working very well for anyone who is in that situation. You mentioned that you came out here 8 years ago. I came out here 12 years ago. We both work in the business of people. We, our networks, our community, our tribe, the people we kind of build around us have been, no doubt, is the case for you, but I know for me certainly have been crucial to my success and my feeling like I am embedded in Sydney. How much have kind of the people that you've met over the last 8 years kind of had an impact on your journey, and how did you go about setting up networks, given that you weren't from here, you didn't grow up here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I consider myself incredibly lucky that I have always had the opportunity to work with incredibly strong female leaders. It's to be honest, it's again another must-have for me. I need to be surrounded by strong women to kind of build my career. I'm a huge, women supporting women, and I think for me throughout my career, I have built this amazing network, whether that is at work itself, and a lot of those relationships have turned into incredibly special friendships. So, I've had that kind of opportunity, but then I also just have women who I respect and admire, and I know who I worked with, back at One Green Bean. Even when I was in agencies in Hong Kong, I have people that I can turn to and be like, hey, can I just get your advice on this? Or this is what I'm thinking for my next step. Do you have any thoughts? And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have built a network of women around me who I can go to for essentially anything. I also really consciously make an effort to be generous with my time. So I'm in an incredibly privileged position where people reach out to me and ask about my career trajectory. They ask about how I got into the space, or how how they could kind of follow suit. And one of the things that I feel, I guess, in terms of not a sense of responsibility, because that sounds very weighty, but I really want to ensure that I'm supporting people in their journey in the same way that I have been supported in mine. So for me, that impact works both ways. It's the impact of people who have been an incredible, source for me, and then hopefully being able to pass that on to others.
I completely agree with you, and that really, really resonates. If anyone's listening to the audio and not watching, I'm like nodding, nodding enthusiastically to each of your points. I feel so strongly about this topic, and I think you're exactly right. That kind of ability. I mean, as women, we're so lucky with the depth of the relationships that we can build, and we do build. I have just a live-in therapy circle in my best friends, and exactly as you said, it's no matter what the topic, no matter what's going on, you kind of know you have that tribe at the other end of a call, and it's something that from a very kind of young age is not really what I want to say, but from the start of my career in Australia, I felt drawn to the fact that there wasn't actually that many female recruitment agency owners, it was mostly male. I'd go to these award ceremonies in the first couple of years, and it would be every bloody guy on stage would be balding and in a suit. And it really kind of occurred to me that this wasn't a common thing. And so I actually set up it's called WOW, a women's agency owner group, a number of years ago. And there's now like almost 30 of us, and we catch up regularly, and we caught up all throughout lockdown. And it's a group that I kind of chair and coordinate. But I've gotten so much from it. It's a group that's kind of taken on its own energy and life now. But I think things like that, coming together, leaning on each other, women supporting women, collaboration, not competition, like that is the ethos of how I operate as well. And I think it's an attitude of abundance rather than an attitude of scarcity. And I think the old school vibe of women competing for the only kind of top spot in the corporate business, like I would like to think that has changed a lot, but I don't think that is what these days.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I love that. I think, and bringing people together who otherwise necessarily paths wouldn't have crossed, as you said, that kind of women ownership network, like how valuable that is to be able to bring groups of people together whose paths potentially wouldn't have crossed otherwise, and the value that you hope that brings in the long term. So I love that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think tying in with what you spoke about earlier, understanding your values, I'm such a proponent of understanding your strengths as well. And I have worked with the team. I've done work myself to really nail what that is. And I know as a human that my strength is facilitating connection. Like that is what I do easily and happily. And that's kind of my absolute passion space. And I think exactly like the values and what we're talking about, when you know that and have that self-awareness around that, you can then fall back on it and say, okay, well, I know what my values are. I know what I stand for. I know what my strengths are. I know where I get my energy from. Do you find that that's the same with you kind of playing to your strengths? And have you done kind of much work on that?
Absolutely. I have built a career based off leaning into my strengths. Like that is essentially what I've done. And I think there's also an element of trusting your gut, like trusting your intuition. I knew when I was talking about leaving One Green Bean, I was talking to a former manager and I was saying, I know there's something between this connection between HR and marketing and comms. And I know it's going to be a thing. I just don't know what it is yet, but I know it's going to be a thing. And for me, that like your gut and your intuition actually can really help you with understanding what your strength is, because it's your very fiber of your being, without getting really hippie and weird, but it's at your core, it's who you are. So I think there's that element of it. And then I think also as well, when it comes to strengths, there are two pieces that so one of which for me is feedback. So I really, really listen to others in terms of I know what I think my strengths are, but it's actually really interesting to hear from others what they think my strengths are. So I try and work on both that, like in my gut of who I am and what I know and who I could be, versus how I'm perceived and what other people think my strengths are. I really make an effort to listen to that, because I know that if someone else has picked up on it, it's probably a strength that I need to address. And then I think, and this is something that I desperately need to work on, and I'm trying very, very hard, but being okay with making mistakes and therefore knowing your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that for me has been a real journey. I do not deal with failure well at all. I wish I could say I just bounce back, I jump back up and get back. I don't. But I'm so, yeah. But I'm so aware that if you don't know your weaknesses, you can't know your strengths, and vice versa. So, and sometimes failure is sometimes just opening your eyes to where perhaps your weaknesses are.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's easy, I think, to lean into your strengths and say, I know what I'm good at and I'm powering ahead. But you're right, that the picture isn't completed until you have the self-awareness, and the self-awareness might come through feedback from others, and it might come from people saying, hey, here's some feedback on what your weaknesses are or your development or whatever that might be. But until you kind of have that final piece of the puzzle, you're not necessarily working from a place of self-awareness. You're just powering through with something you think you're good at. So, and you don't necessarily refine or tweak or continue on a path of improvement because you're not necessarily kind of addressing the things that do need to be addressed. But for type A's who are drivers who want to get things done and make shit happen, it's like I don't want to hear that. Thinking about myself, obviously. Feel free to to relate if that lands. And that's it. I completely know. I know exactly what you mean, and it's important. I think it's important for all of us. It's important. I had this realization probably a few years ago that I genuinely believe in the world of work. A huge percentage of what we do day to day is navigating relationships. And it doesn't matter what facet you're in, it doesn't matter what vertical you do, it doesn't matter what your role is. I think that if you can keep really strong, favorable, and authentic, it cannot be forced, but if you can keep really strong personal relationships and build good relationships, for me, that's with my team, with my shareholders, with my suppliers, with obviously my candidates and clients. If I can maintain really strong relationships and do the best by people and demonstrate care and authenticity, I can guarantee you my life is going to be a huge amount easier than if I was prickly and kind of causing rows and creating drama or anything like that. And it's just this kind of massive light bulb moment, because it's not easy. It's not the easiest thing to do. Do you find that you have to work at it? You really do.
Yeah. No, I definitely find that. I think also as well for me, it just makes work so much more enjoyable. If I have those relationships, if I have people that I can turn to and I feel like people can turn to me, I'm definitely, as I said, I'm way more of a people empathy type vibe. And that's the way I operate, and I thrive in environments like that. But ultimately, the day-to-day relationships that you build, as you said, whether that's with your team, whether that's with the CEO, no matter who that's with, it ultimately just makes work run so much easier. And to your point around authentic, being authentic and being transparent, it also makes those harder conversations easier, because they know that you're showing up with like as your true self. You're not coming to create issues, you're not coming to create drama. The conversation has been kind of honest and transparent from day one, and they know who you are and you know who they are. And in turn, those difficult conversations, I hate difficult conversations, no one enjoys them. Well, actually some people do, but it's not it's not fun. But the strong relationships really help and tend to make it more solutions focused and less conflict focused. And ultimately you need to find solutions. So I couldn't agree more.
Exactly. And we want to enjoy what we're doing. We want to enjoy the people we walk into a room with, or we jump on a Zoom with, or we spend a lot of our time with, or we problem solve with, or we deal with kind of work dramas and client issues, whatever it is. You want to enjoy that. And I think when you can create those bonds and create those, again, authentic, genuine relationships, it makes your working life a lot easier. And that's what's really, really, to me, that's what's changed over the last few years. It's how much the delineation between our work and our life, it has been blended in the most fantastic way. I mean, you are speaking to me from the UK. I'm sitting in Sydney. I'm going to be working from Ireland in a few weeks. It's fascinating how much it has changed, and the insight that we've had to people's lives. And I think that acceleration of obviously the digital transformation and everything that's happened and how we leverage tech at work, but also the acceleration of how we actually see individuals as holistic people with working lives and children and families. And you kind of, that layer has been peeled back a bit. And I find that absolutely amazing, the progress that we've made on that. It's a huge win from the last few years.
Couldn't agree more. And for me, I think, so I have 2 children, and for me, seeing that change and seeing people start to recognize the fact that your life, you have a life outside of coming to work every day, and knowing simple things, but like all of my team members' kids' names, and being able to say hi on a Zoom call. And I have no my kids join my Zoom calls. My kids come to work with me sometimes, because sometimes you're just having one of those days. But at the same turn, I can be in the playground on the phone to my coach. So I have, yes, I think the lines are blurred, but I don't think it's in a bad way at all. And it is up to you to set those personal boundaries around, and for me, I log off at a certain time when the kids are home from school, just so that they have uninterrupted me time, because they go to bed like an hour and a half later or something, and that's it. So they get me uninterrupted, but I set that boundary very clearly with my team. And if something is going to change, I manage that with my husband. The ways of working really have changed, but I think that blend and those blurred lines actually make for a more healthy environment.
Absolutely. It's been such an incredible change. And I think, as we know, the 9 to 5, the Monday to Friday, like that was set up in a time that really supported men going out to work and women were at home. And that is the setup. So the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, it's a male preference. It is completely a structure and a system and a setup that is completely in support of how men used to work however many decades ago when it came into place, and women were massively disadvantaged, and that's why there'd be part-time work and people removing themselves from the workforce because it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't set up for us. And so for women with families and with children to have it in this way where it is completely blended, it's finally allowing parents and mothers and primary caregivers the opportunity to sort of have a career and have that work experience, that career experience, without compromising on being away from the office and catching maybe an hour a day of your child being awake, which is massive. And it massively impacts women more than it does men in a very positive way.
100%. I think as well, going back to what we were talking about in terms of looking for new opportunities, it's like knowing what you need. Like there's the value side of it, which is obviously so important, but there's the element of what do you need as a human being to feel like you have that things are in balance, and for me, I know that I need flexible working. I do not need to come into an office every day. I'm very aware that over the past 3 years, I've proved myself fully capable of doing a brilliant job working from my spare room. So there's something too as well, I think, knowing exactly what you need and assessing employers based on that. You look at the kind of impact of someone like Tesla, who came out and, we all saw that Elon Musk tweet, but the impact of that and people choosing to leave because that doesn't work for them. It's really important. And I think, again, when you're looking for a job, it's got to be a major consideration.
Absolutely. And I think what can really support people who know what they're looking for is the fact that this market is so talent short. And particularly in Australia, candidates are so in demand and there is a talent shortage. And yes, things have changed over the last little while in that it's stabilized somewhat, but I know that there's a lot of businesses, yourselves included, that are still hiring. And so you do get to kind of come to the table and say, no, do you know what I'm seeing? Businesses do 4-day working weeks. I'm seeing businesses offer genuine remote first kind of working environments, and you can, and it's not for everyone, right? Some people love being in the office and love being around people. So really defining and articulating what you need is really good advice, because again, that will look different to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So it all comes down to personal preference and finding someone that aligns with that.
Exactly. And I think the shoe is on the other foot in terms of the need for talent and how much businesses want good people. And so if there was ever a time to dictate what you might want and what you
now's the time. I love this though. I talk about this a lot at work, is that, the shift from employer to employee now, and that you look at what we've been through just as like a society, less kind of corporations and employers and all that type of stuff, more just as a society and what we've been through. And I don't see this as a bad thing. I think it's only going to help us progress further, and really start to challenge some of the notions of what work looks like. So I personally think it's very exciting, and I really hope that I get to continue to be a part of that, because it's creating opportunities for others where it wouldn't have been possible. And that, for me, I think that equality, equity, and ensuring equal opportunities for people that's the most important thing. That's what we need to be doing. So yeah, it's exciting. I find it very exciting.
It is. It's really exciting. And it's something I've thought a huge amount about over the last couple of years, because it was such an odd experience that we were all trapped in our houses. When would you ever in life, we all lead busy lives, when would you ever have had the opportunity to have a massive pause? And it was traumatic. There was the health concerns, there was the redundancies, there was it was not a pleasant experience. But what did happen is that there was a huge pause button pushed. And that for me just felt like the most incredible opportunity to reflect on what I had been doing in life to date and how I wanted to lead my life kind of moving forward. And that touched everything. That touched kind of, for me, thinking about how much time I wanted to spend in Ireland and see my family and shipping them over here. And it touched on work-life balance and so many, the scope of my role and just so many, and the shape of my business, so many different things. But it was such an opportunity. And throughout that, we obviously, as we've touched on, have had this massive change in how we work as well. And we're all getting used to this. But it's a really, really amazing positive to just being able to kind of, put a pause on and really take the opportunity. And that's what we're seeing, as I've touched on before, with candidates and individuals. And people are saying, I now know what's important to me. I've had the noise and the kind of hysteria of our day-to-day lives, running around, meetings, doing a million things. I've had that stripped back and I've had that kind of removed. And now I know what's important to me. And I think we'll see the impacts of that reverberate over the next couple of years and beyond, of course, as people really reassess. And even this year, look at how many people are, yourself included, overseas. I've so many people hand in their notice and go overseas. Everyone's in Europe. Everyone is in
Europe. It's pretty nice. I'm not gonna lie. No, it's true though. And we have exactly the same for our team. Ultimately, for a lot of people who have not had the opportunity to spend time with family or to experience, to just experience being back with their community, no matter what that family looks like, that is incredibly special to be able to offer people that. So I think, go for it. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's been amazing from a work perspective as well, because it's really challenged the way that I work and the way that I operate. So win all round, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that when the borders started to open up, most of my team, they're all recruiters. So naturally they're from the UK and Ireland and overseas. I still don't have a fully thought through answer as to why that is within our industry. Some people ask me and I still don't know. God knows. But naturally they're all going back to that side of the world. And so for me, I'm saying to people, take 4 weeks, take 6 weeks, go and do a chunk, work from where you need to work from. And that is the human side of it. It's like that exactly as you've very, you articulated just now, it's the community, the tribe, the filling up your cup. I spent 3 months in Ireland at the end of last year and worked from there doing what you're doing now, the early starts. And it was everything. I healed from a traumatic couple of years. And it was everything that my soul needed. And then I've come back from that experience with a even more sort of forward-thinking approach to flexible working, because I'm like, I know I can do it. I can do it. You can do it. We can figure it out. I think it's a good thing for businesses to embrace. And I honestly can't even tell you how many businesses that I'm still speaking to who we have to coach in that direction, because how they've actually been running it is trying to get people back into the office. They speak about the need to ignite culture, to get people back together for bonding. And I just want to we consult and we guide, and it is different for every business and every team and all of that. But I just think you're lagging. You're lagging, and you need to keep up, or you'll start to feel the pain quickly.
Yeah. Totally. And I think there's still a need for connection. I
Mhm.
love nothing more than seeing my team in person. But, you know, and this is how we're operating at Canva. It's also just how I operate personally. But coming together for points of connection, coming together with purpose and with an opportunity to really, I don't know, whether you're like going to hit you're strategizing for a goal or you're celebrating something, whatever that is, I
Mm.
think it's not taking away the fact that human connection still isn't fundamental to the experience. It is, but how that looks doesn't need to be me sitting at my desk from
Mm.
9 to 5 o'clock. And
Mhm.
it's challenging the notion on I guess the day to day, when in fact what really really matters are these, as I said, these moments, these points where you come together.
Mhm. Yeah, completely agree. It's there's a book called Moments. I can't remember the name of the author, but he speaks about peak moments and speaks about the kind of when you have the opportunity to have this connection and these moments together, and they're the things you remember more so than kind of the small bits and pieces
Yeah.
day to day. And when you can facilitate that and create that and make sure that that still happens, then you do sort of have a recipe for success. And everyone's different in how much of that they need, but I totally agree. We can't replace the human connection, but you can approach it with a different lens and have a different perspective on how it's
Yeah.
done. With regards, I guess, wrapping up and thinking about a final piece of advice, you've shared some amazing advice around values and playing to your strengths. If someone listening to this is feeling inspired by how much you have kind of shared, you love your role, you love what you do. If someone's in a rut, thinking about a move, where would you suggest that they start in starting to make moves towards doing something that they're super passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we've touched on values, we've touched on strengths. Once you've worked that out, I think, especially if it's a move, and I've done this quite a few times now where I've like flipped my career slightly, and there's always a tangible red thread through everything. And I'm a really I'm a really good example of, if you look at my CV, people are just like, what is this? Like, what is this? But when you start talking to me, you're like, okay, I get it. She could do this, she could do this. And that those transferable skills really do ring true. So I think my one piece of advice would be, know what your elevator pitch is, how,
Yeah.
like, who you are and where you want to go and what impact you can have doing that. So something that really talks to what your experience can bring to the role that no one else can. So whether you're thinking about those transferable skills or what it is that makes you unique, that's going to set you apart, that would be my, like, know your elevator pitch, know who you are, where you want to go and what you want to do, and that will make it so much easier when it comes to the kind of applying for jobs, the interview process, because you have a very clear um, understanding of exactly who you are and what you want.
Yeah. And then you can articulate it. And then when you have kind of the opportunity to share it with the right people and the people who are listening and the people who could open doors for you, you can very succinctly articulate exactly what it is you
Yep.
want and what it is you want to go. And then you can progress and move forward. So that's really good advice. And I think as well, like with your role and your career, it's so interesting the journey you've had, but it's almost like you've been working towards a role that, as you said, it didn't exist. Like when you first started out your career, you could never have kind of planned, I want to be in talent attraction, employee experience. Like it didn't exist. And it's kind of been created in this land and world of tech, where in knowledge-based industries, it is absolutely crucial for the people and the knowledge and the brains of the business to be engaged and to be happy and to be feeling like they're valued. And so it has just sort of become a thing over the last number of years. And so sometimes you do have to be very open-minded as well in where it will take you, because potentially your role right now that you're going to have in 10 years doesn't actually exist in any form.
That's kind of what I'm banking the rest of my career on, is that I just continue to build things that don't yet, don't
Yep.
exist. And that for me personally is incredibly exciting. So throw caution to the wind. And like, if you really trust your gut with something and you know who you are and where you want to be, like, make it happen.
Yeah. Follow that gut. The gut, the intuition does not lie. Hone that skill within an inch of Amazing. Look, thank you so much, Charlotte. That was honestly, I could stay chatting to you all day.
I know.
No, but I absolutely could. Thank you so much for your insights and your time. I really appreciate it. I know everyone will really enjoy that as well. So thanks for coming on.
And thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely to chat.
My pleasure.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.